Field 16, congruent figures. In question 1, we're going to be given something is congruent to something else, and we need to complete the statements. So we need to be concerned about the placement of everything. So given triangle QXR is congruent to triangle NYC, and we want to figure out what is congruent to segment QX. So I look at segment QX, which is the first two letters. So the first two letters of the other one are NY. So it's congruent to segment NY. Angle Y, so the next part is we're going to look at what is angle Y. So Y is the second letter, so I'm going to look at the second letter. So it's congruent to angle X. Alright, the next one we have given triangle BAT is congruent to triangle FOR, and we have TA segment, so I'm going to go the last one and then the second letter of the other one, so that would be RO. Make sure you put them in the proper order or it won't really make sense. Okay, and the next one, angle R. Angle R is the last letter of the second one, so I'm looking at the last letter of the first one is congruent to angle T. Alright, and the next one, given the quadrilateral BAND is congruent to the quadrilateral LUCK, and the angle U is the second letter, so I'm looking at the second letter, which is A, so it's congruent to angle A. Segment DB, so the last letter, then the first letter, last letter, then the first letter is KL segment. Okay, and then finally NDBA. So N, then D, then B, then A. So I start with the third letter and then just go on. So that would be CKLU, and that would be your congruent statements. For questions 8 and 9, we're going to be finding the variables, the values of the variables in each problem. So for 8, we know triangle ABC is congruent to triangle KLM, and we need to find T and X. Okay, so since we know that they are congruent, we can say a few things. We can say that A is the same as K, and we can say that AB is the same as KL, and we can say that M is the same as C. Okay, so now let's see what we can do with that information. Well, I'm going to start because I have 4 inches and 2 T inches, so I'm going to solve for T first. 2T is the same as 4. So to solve for T, I'm going to divide by 2, and T equals 2. So that's the first part. Now I need to figure out how to solve for M. Well, in order to do that, I need to find the angle C here. So I need to first use my triangle angle sum. So that's going to tell me that 45 plus the 90 plus my angle C is going to equal 180. Alright, so then from there I can solve for C by subtracting 90 and 45, so the measure of angle C is equal to 45 degrees. Okay, now the next thing is I know that's the measure of angle C, so then from there I can find the X. So 3X equals 45. So I divide by 3, and X equals 15. And that is your final answer for that. For question 9, I'm given that that triangle ACD is congruent to triangle ACB. Okay, so what that means is this angle DAC is the same as BAC. Okay, so on this one, all I have to do is set them equal to each other right away. So I have 6x equals 30. Solve for x equals 5. And that's your final answer. Okay, for this last example, number 14, given AB is parallel to DC, angle B is congruent to angle D, AB is congruent to DC, and BC is congruent to AD. We want to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA. So we're going to look at the picture on your sheet. So if we're proving this, we're going to start with what we're given. So step 1 is to write what you're given. AB is parallel to DC. Angle B is congruent to angle D. AB is congruent to DC. And finally, BC is congruent to AD. So that's all the stuff that we're given. Okay, so step 2, we have to see what we can do from there. So there's a couple different ways that we can go. I'm going to look at the angles. Because of these parallel lines, I can say things about this transversal line. I can say that this angle and this angle are the same. So for step 2, what I'm going to say is angle BAC is congruent to angle DCA. And I can say that because of the alternate interior angle theorem. Okay, then the next step, I'm going to look at my other angles, see if I can somehow get those to be equal to each other. Well, I don't even have to really do much because I have another theorem, because I know that this angle and this angle are the same and these two angles are the same. The third angles have to be the same. So step 3 is to say that angle BCA is congruent to angle DAC, and that's by our third angle theorem. All right, next step is I need to get that last line to be congruent to itself. Well, it's the same line. This line is the same line in both triangles. So I can say that segment AC is congruent to segment AC, and that's the reflexive property. So 4 is reflexive. And then finally, my last step is to make my final conclusion. So step 5, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA, and that reasoning is by definition of congruent figures. Triangles, to be specific. Definition of congruent triangles, because we're saying the two triangles are congruent. So we're done. So that's it for your notes over Skill 16, Congruent Figures. Summarize your notes, finish the rest of your practice problems, and then you should be ready for your quiz.